My name is Liam Bendixson, and I'm a rising senior at Brown. This summer, I interned at Strict Scrutiny, a podcast about the Supreme Court and the legal culture that surrounds it. As a member of the Strict Scrutiny team, I've studied the new conservative supermajority's jurisprudence, written grant applications, designed new merchandise, and contributed to the podcast's show notes for summer episodes. I've also researched recent changes in how the High Court operates, such as the growing dominance of textualism and the three-member liberal wing's voting patterns. As a longtime fan of the podcast and someone who plans to attend law school in the future, I've deeply appreciated the opportunity to learn from three of the foremost constitutional scholars of our time, Professors Murray, Lippman, and Shaw, who host the podcast. Truly went out of their way to help me make the most of my experience and encourage me to delve deeper into topics of interest. I was particularly grateful for the chance to join podcast recording sessions and meet expert litigators and scholars like Professor Jamal Green, civil rights attorney Isha Anand, and Professor Kate Levine. Hearing these guests hash out the day's most pressing appellate law issues with the podcast hosts was incredibly special and rewarding. Before interning with the podcast, I knew relatively little about the internal workings of the Supreme Court. As part of my work on strict scrutiny, I've learned about the intricacies of constitutional and statutory interpretation, read Supreme Court opinions in full, critiqued analyses of the High Court's rulings, written briefs, and have generally become acquainted with the court's legal culture and dynamics. I'm truly grateful to have had this experience, and I look forward to continuing my work with the team this fall.
Hi, my name is Charlotte Devon, and this past summer I worked as a strategic education policy and communications intern at Effective to Great Education, or ETGE. ETGE is an emerging education technology startup that focuses around cultural, trauma-informed social emotional learning and mindfulness integration to increase education equity. As an intern, I had a couple different duties. My main focus was around writing blogs, drafting social media posts, attending Zoom meetings, and working on a long-term summer project. My project was focusing on measuring the effectiveness of ETGE's curriculum and technology at their pilot schools. So one of the biggest challenges I ran into during this internship was turning my big ideas into a tangible product that ETGE could actually use. And so at times the scale of the project seemed really big, but I was able to overcome this challenge by thinking out loud with fellow interns and my supervisor to come up with solutions that would yield a result that ETGE could actually use. I'd say the most rewarding aspect of this internship was creating a final product that I was super proud of. Not only did it represent all that I had learned, but it also showed off all the people that I had connected to and the perspectives that I gained throughout this process.
Hi, my name is Claire Hodges. I'm a senior studying public policy, and thanks to the generous support that I received from Brown University's Taubman Center as a recipient of the 2021 John Hazen White Senior Scholarship, I spent the summer interning at the Hazen Center for Climate Change Law, which is a part of Columbia University's law school. The center maintains resources on climate change laws and regulations and trains lawyers and students on climate change litigation techniques. Although the internship was remote, I learned so much about environmental law and policy, and I'm extremely grateful to the Hazen Center and to all of the climate law fellows and the legal professors that I was able to work with for their mentorship and their support in this role. For my projects, I examine renewable energy and natural gas infrastructure laws, I analyze the effects of climate change on employment and global economies, I identified challenges to calculating corporate carbon emissions, among so many other topics. And as a prospective law student, I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I had in this role and the connections that I was able to make. So thank you again, Brown and John Hazen White, for granting me this tremendous and rewarding opportunity.
Hello, my name is Sarah Schumacher Green, and this summer I worked for Rhode Island for Community and Justice, which is a Providence nonprofit that runs youth programs and has a juvenile justice policy team. I worked for the most part to help restart Providence's Juvenile Hearing Board, which is a pre-court diversion program that basically connects kids to community resources instead of petitioning them to family court. Yeah, it was a very challenging but rewarding experience. I went to a lot of different community organizations to try to build partnerships so that we could send our youth there. I met a lot of different people who are trying to keep kids out of the system in Providence, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about kind of my positionality in doing this work and what it means to be a college student or someone who's coming directly out of college, and how I need to just kind of learn for a bit, learn from people who've been doing this work longer than me, and learn directly from the people who will be impacted by the policy changes I want to make. But yeah, overall, I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity to do this work this summer, and I'm excited for the new opportunities that it will afford me going forward.
This summer, I interned for Human Rights First, a human rights organization that advocates for the human rights of people around the world, and more specifically has a refugee representation team that I got to be a part of this summer. The refugee representation team provides free pro bono legal counsel to asylum seekers in the United States who otherwise would not be able to afford an attorney. My main responsibilities as an intern was to screen potential clients, meaning talk to them, get a basic overview of their asylum claim, and jot down their basic information before sending that over to my supervisor, who would ultimately decide whether or not we could take that case. It was incredibly interesting work. I got to talk to people from all walks of life, from very different countries, cultures, ethnicities, backgrounds, all with very interesting stories about why they had to flee their countries. And it was also at times quite challenging. It was difficult to, at a certain point, have to acknowledge that there are limited resources, especially while you're also sitting there thinking that you'd like to help everyone you talk to. Overall, though, it was an incredibly informative and interesting experience that I would highly recommend for everyone. I got to learn a lot about not only very different countries and cultures, but also about the immigration process and the asylum seeking process in the United States. And I would highly recommend an internship with Human Rights First.
Hi, my name is Bailey Peralto. I'm in the class of 2021.5 and I'm studying public policy. The 8-week internship that I took part in this summer was with the Mental Health Association of Rhode Island under Executive Director Lori Marie Pisciota, and I worked as a policy intern. During the internship, I wore multiple different hats, all of which kept me really engaged in policy work and advocacy work throughout the state of Rhode Island. I was engaged in multiple different projects, including working with a team of interns to write a report on the state of Rhode Island's behavioral health care system, in addition to writing and presenting testimony at the Rhode Island General Assembly, researching for position statements for my supervisor, as well as presenting some of my own research to the Mental Health Association Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. This opportunity for this internship actually began in June of 2020, and I've been continuing as an unpaid intern over the course of these last 14 months. And luckily, this award gave me the opportunity to continue it into this summer as well. I've really learned a lot from the internship. I've learned about the formal policy-making process through the Rhode Island General Assembly, how the House and the Senate work specifically in Rhode Island, and I've learned about the informal process of engaging in advocacy with people individually and understanding and listening to people's stories, which is just as important for policy as the formal work is. Overall, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to continue this internship into this summer and to continue my work as a policy intern. It will definitely inform my future career as an advocate, as someone who influences policies and policy making, and overall it has been a great experience.
My name is Emily, and this summer I interned with Effective to Great Education, which is an EdTech DC-based startup that develops social emotional learning tools for under-resourced Black and Brown communities in the DC area. And I personally conducted data analysis looking at police and counselor presence in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and then collaborated with a fellow intern to develop a report that included a literature review, my data analysis, and then policy recommendations for that geographic area. Definitely the most rewarding aspect of the internship experience was doing research in a professional setting. I'd done research in an academic setting, and it just feels different when it's for a professor or for a grade rather than because you are working professionally to further the mission of an organization that you feel like you're a part of. It's a very, I think, unique experience that I hadn't had before, and it was very cool. One of the most challenging aspects was just the fact that COVID is happening and everything's virtual. It's harder to connect with people at the organization. You don't feel the same collective energy in an office environment, but it was still a really great experience. I learned a lot about education and policy and social emotional learning, and I'm very grateful for the experience.
So I spent this summer working at the Rhode Island Center for Justice. The CFJ does legal advocacy work in criminal justice, housing, and utility reform. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, the CFJ has started taking on individual clients a lot at a much faster rate than they usually do. So I was actually brought on as a CS-oriented intern to try to redo their intake system and make it a lot more efficient and try to help some of the capacity issues that they've been facing. So while I was working on that, I've got a lot of valuable experience talking to vendors and talking to software developers about APIs and all of that tech stuff, and then also communicating that back to the legal staff that I worked with at the CFJ. And it was a really valuable experience to really, like, for the most part, kind of be directing a project. Beyond that project, I worked on a little bit of client intakes, which was incredibly rewarding because I got to speak to the Rhode Island residents that are really on the front lines of this housing crisis, and really see how interpersonal a lot of these social justice efforts are. And beyond that, I did some research for staff attorneys, and I also was part of an effort to revitalize the Rhode Island Landlord-Tenant Handbook, which is sort of a passion project of the CFJ. Overall, it was a really formative experience, and I learned a lot about myself and about how social justice works in Rhode Island.
Hi, my name is Gina Sinclair. I'm a rising senior at Brown University, and I'm studying international relations and history. This past summer, I was an intern at International Crisis Group, which is an organization that works to prevent wars and shape peace. As an intern, I was able to go into the New York office, and I was responsible for tracking the movements of the United Nations Security Council. I took notes on meetings, attended briefings as a representative of Crisis Group, and throughout all of this, I was able to gain a really strong foundation and a deep understanding of the conflicts that we see on the news today, such as the ones in Mali, Myanmar, Afghanistan, Ethiopia, just to name a few. It was really fulfilling to see how the UN system works and to understand how an organization like International Crisis Group fits into this system by shaping policies and informing the public. I was also able to learn so much from my two mentors, Ashish Pradhan and Richard Gowan. They're both very, very knowledgeable and experienced, and being able to work alongside them was very fulfilling, and I learned a lot. All in all, my experience at International Crisis Group was very, very worthwhile, and it will definitely shape what I want to do in the future. Thank you.
This summer, the John Hazen White Senior Internship supported my work with the Safety Net Project at Harvard Law School's Legal Services Center, or LSC. LSC provides free legal services to the greater Boston community through direct representation, information sharing, and advocacy for systemic change. I represented clients who were appealing the unfair denial of their benefits. I prepared briefs for administrative law judges, conducted personal interviews, and gathered evidence from medical providers. Given that 70% of applicants in disability hearings are unrepresented and those without representation are denied benefits over 75% of the time, this work is essential, especially for those without income in the middle of a pandemic. I also had the opportunity to organize LSC's Corey sealing and expungement clinics. In Massachusetts, interactions with the criminal justice system are gathered as part of a state-run database, or Corey. For decades, a less-than-perfect Corey has prevented people from accessing employment and housing. As part of these clinics, I reached out to local partners, presented PowerPoints on legal pathways, and gave individualized advice to seal or expunge people's records. The most rewarding part of my LSC experience was the ability to provide valuable services in real time. The opportunity to cut through bureaucracy and give my clients' cases a fighting chance was very fulfilling. I witnessed firsthand the importance of legal warriors dedicated to community service and advocacy, and it deepened my passion to pursue a career in the public interest. And for that, I am eternally grateful.
Hi, my name is Kayla Guo. I'm a 22.5er studying public policy at Brown, and this summer I was awarded the Noah Krieger Class of '93 Internship Award. The Noah Krieger 93 Internship Award provided me with the opportunity to intern with the Rhode Island Center for Justice in Providence this summer, where I focused on criminal justice and prisoners' rights and conducted legal research on post-conviction relief in Rhode Island and more broadly throughout the nation. My internship with the center was an unparalleled opportunity to effect change from both a legal and an advocacy perspective. By focusing in on a specific element of the criminal legal system, post-conviction relief, I was able to work at the intersection of law and social justice and to engage directly with judiciary staff and with the experiences of incarcerated individuals. As an aspiring journalist interested in reporting on policy, law, and justice, I valued the opportunities to hone my investigative and legal research skills by diving into post-conviction relief, filing a public records request, and familiarizing myself with legal documents and writing. Furthermore, being able to conduct impactful and engaged legal research while learning about law and policy itself, and while forming relationships with the center's attorneys and with the other interns, were undoubtedly the most rewarding aspects of my internship. And though I experienced a bit of a learning curve parsing legal jargon and documents, my supervising attorney and my project partner guided me through each step of the process and welcomed any and all of my questions. As a result, I gained a firmer understanding of the types of legal documents I was working with and the criminal legal system as a whole, preparing me to further engage in law and policy in the future and to hopefully effect change in these realms as a reporter or as a public interest lawyer at an organization like the Rhode Island Center for Justice one day.